Hi, everybody. We have a really lovely interview coming up today with Angela Smith, who is a remote viewer, and she's a classic remote viewer. She's been well-trained. She was with PERS at Princeton and has been able to connect with information far beyond what normally happens in remote viewing, and that she's been able to connect with species in other dimensions and from other places within the universe so that they can share with us what their experience of life is as opposed to Earth, and also their experience with each other and their interface with human beings. So without further ado, let's go to Angela Smith. And Angela, it's so good to have you here today. I'm really looking forward to this interview. I just have to say one thing. I have to tell you, this all came up because I was having lunch last weekend with Russell Targ, whose new documentary, Third Eye Spies, about his years with the CIA and remote viewing, is coming out soon. So he and Paula Harris and I were all having lunch together, and your name came up, and he said, yes, she's very good. And I thought, that's all I need is to hear it from the spy trainer himself. So, Angela, first of all, I would like our audience to get to know you a bit and how this started showing itself for you in your childhood, these abilities, because it is a unique skill set that we all can access if we were so inclined, but some people just have it built in a little more naturally. It expresses earlier in life. So let's talk about you as a little girl and seeing.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. And I had an ability when I was a child called out-of-body experience. And it wasn't just a one-off thing. This occurred all the way through my childhood and early teens. And I thought everybody could do it until I learned not everybody could do it in my 20s. And then started researching. So I was always an intuitive child.
Well, let's talk about the nature of the out-of-body experiences and then the proofs you were getting, and also how your parents aligned with this.
Okay, well, when I was put to bed, before I went to sleep, and I knew the difference between waking dreams and like imagination, etc. I would go in my mind, it'd go sit upon the roof. And I would go wander around the neighborhood, visit family and friends. And I visited my head teacher's house because she was a very kind person. And I saw lots of cut glass and crystal around her house. And one day I was talking to her and I told her this in my childhood innocence. And she said, "How do you know that?" I said, "I saw it." And she said, "Oh," and she just let it drop. But I knew from that, I was about 10 maybe when that happened, 8, 9, 10. So I thought, okay, well, it seems like I really can do this. And in my teens, I put it aside for a while because I thought perhaps I was causing things to happen. I would see accidents or catastrophes, and I stopped for a while. I was fairly religious in my teens. And then in my 20s and 30s, I was at Cardiff University and then at Manchester University doing degrees. And I joined up with a group called the Outer Limits of the Mind. It was an evening group. And I started researching and going when people went on vacation. I asked, can I remote view you on holiday?
As a little girl, when you said you were religious and in your teens, you were starting to think that you were actually the cause of these accidents because you were seeing them. So was this somehow mixed in with the notion you were doing the devil's work or something?
Not really.
How did it feel?
It was uncomfortable seeing these things. And I was trying to look for some causes and reasons. And I said, okay, I'm not going to do this for now. And then later on, I started, researching again, personal research.
And you ended up, you seem just to be the most kind and nurturing person. So it's not a surprise to anyone that you did get a degree early on in nursing and that you were also working with children. You also got a degree in psychology. And so let's talk about how this other skill set of yours was perhaps overlaying your education and the other services you were providing, such as maybe by way of, say, medical intuition.
When I was a nurse, I entered nursing training at 18 and did a 3-year. It's a different process in England. You're actually on the wards right from the very beginning. And then you take out, weeks out for school. And I often knew when a patient pressed a bell and needed something, before I went into their room, I knew what they wanted. But I learned that you can't go in with whatever they want right away because it freaks them out. How did you know what I wanted? So I would leave whatever it was outside the room, go in, let them tell me what they wanted. I'd go and get it. And they'd say, oh, that was quick.
That's such a sweet story. I love it. Were you able at times to even perhaps see something going on in their bodies that the doctors were not aware of? I mean, for example, in a complex situation or where something unexpected happened or went sideways?
Sometimes, nothing dramatic. Usually I could intuit if there was if the patient was starting to go downhill.
Yes.
And I could call the doctor or put something in place that would help them. I did one time, because I was religious. I'm not religious in my older age, but I was as a young person. And there was one time when a little infant was brought in, a gypsy baby, who was very, very sick. And they weren't doing very much with her. And I thought, this is such a shame. This is such a sweet baby. This is an innocent life. And I went ahead and took it on myself to baptize the baby and give it a blessing. And it recovered.
Oh,
now, I'm not saying I healed the baby.
No, but it shows your care.
I care.
I know that in England, the relationship socially with the gypsy clans is very challenged and strained,
yes,
as it is in other places. But so oftentimes they become marginalized. And every culture has their marginalized people that aren't getting the care they should. And I just think it's wonderful that you took the care to do that.
I feel very often that's my role in life.
Indeed. Well, now let's continue on and get you to the United States. That's back in '81, as I recall, and how you ended up involved with PERS at Princeton. Explain a little bit about that program and your transition from England over to America.
Okay. It's actually PAIR, PEAR, the Princeton
PAIR.
Engineering Anomalous.
Oh, I'm so sorry. When I said it, I was mixing it up verbally with the California, I think it's the California State Employees Pension Plan, not
okay.
PAIR. I'm sorry.
That's different. I came to the States. I was married to an American, and it did not turn out well. But by that time, I didn't come for my green card, but I had my green card by that time. So I decided to stay and eventually became a citizen. And I was working at the time for in medical research in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And this was the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey at the time. And I started going down as a volunteer to 2 parapsychology labs at Princeton. There was a parapsychological, physiological lab that closed down. And then PAIR, they invited me to go over to PAIR and volunteer because I loved doing this stuff. And after I'd been volunteering with them for maybe 6 months, they said, would you like to come work with us? So I went, yes, yes. So they actually made a job for me.
And what was that job? What were you hired to do? And who else was there? Because I know there are some other somewhat high-profile people who were involved with PAIR.
Right. I was basically a research assistant, and I worked with Brenda Dunn, who was the manager. So she and I worked very much as a team, and I was there 5 years. Robert John was the director. He's since passed away. Of course, Brenda Dunn, Roger Nelson with his, he has the Global Consciousness Project, which you might find interesting to look into if you haven't already. And a whole bunch of very talented, intelligent people, and I loved it there. Everybody in the RV community, parapsychological community, alternative health, alternative energy, came through that lab to visit.
And you were brought in specifically to do RV's remote viewing?
No, I came in to assist Brenda.
You were what?
My role to assist Brenda.
To assist Brenda, okay. So
Yeah.
now let's continue on, because remote viewing became the better part of your life.
Yeah, well, at Pair, they were doing a process called precognitive remote perception, which I've learned since was the civilian equivalent of what they were doing at the Stargate unit with the military, the remote viewing. So I had 5 years of remote perception work. We all participated in it, as well as helped at the lab. And when I left Pair and came to Las Vegas, I met up with Paul Smith's brother. And Paul Smith, of course, was one of the Army remote viewing originals, and eventually got to train with him in remote viewing, controlled remote viewing, and with Lynn Buchanan.
Yes. Okay, so now once you're trained in this, when did you start actually taking cases on and become part of teams that did this on a professional level?
Actually, before I became trained, because I was using my own natural abilities, and something called coordinate remote viewing was you would get a coordinate, which was either a series of letters and numbers or a picture or a very low level front loading. This is an object, this is a picture. So around 1994, I started working for a group in California, which was a break-off group from Ed Dame's SciTech group.
Yes, and I think some of our viewers are familiar with Ed Dame, whom I've also interviewed, and then of course followed Russell Targ's work for years. And I've had some experiences myself, actually, of remote viewing just in a classroom setting where they say, okay, what's in the box, that sort of thing.
Right.
And so I'm a little bit familiar with it, but it does take a unique kind of mind, because once a person is married to the notion they have to be right, where that kind of fear/ego comes in, it really can dismantle those abilities quickly, right?
Whenever I get a case and I sit down with my pen and paper, I say, my cool down, some people use a cool down to just clear their mind, get grounded. I say, I know nothing, which means my ego knows nothing. So I'm just going to get the data, write it down, record it, and report it.
Now, one of the people that was very well known early on in remote viewing, of course, was Ingo Swann, and I know you speak about him from time to time. And there were other people in Russell's program, such as Pat Price, who died early on in this work. That's still a mystery. I think that's included in Third Eye Spies, Russell's documentary, is what happened, to this incredible remote viewer. So you were actually among some pretty, astoundingly talented people, but then you went on to do something I think that's just even more exciting. But before we get to that, let's talk about some of the cases that might be a little more high profile that you ultimately ended up with as a remote viewer.
Okay. From around 2000, I started to have more cases coming in, more clients. And one of the clients, I had two separate clients who wanted me to look at Amelia Earhart and her demise. So I did some work back in 96, 97, and then again around 2012. And so I did what's called ERV, which is extended remote viewing, which is just going with my mind and looking and reporting back data. And everybody said, no, that never happened. I saw her picked up off a beach by the Japanese, put into a ship. taken off to another location. So I had this second client who wanted me to bring in more remote viewers, and I have a small group of trained remote viewers around the United States called the Nevada Remote Viewing Group, the NRVG. And I put it to them, and we got a lot more information in. So I presented that in a report. I presented it at an IRVA conference, the Remote Viewing Association. And then recently, the History Channel put out a documentary that confirmed all of our data.
And can you talk about that? What is it that you collectively saw?
We saw her as the group, of course, they gave different aspects of the data, yeah. And showing that she was picked up off an atoll, she was taken to another location by ship, and she was imprisoned on Saipan Island. And she was a prisoner of the Japanese. Some of the viewers saw the Japanese flag. They actually described a soldier in a Japanese uniform. And I have written it up. I have a book called Seer, and you can also get the video of the talk from IRVA. As I was watching the documentary, the History Channel documentary of Amelia, their search for Amelia, it was like checking all the boxes of our data. Just very exciting. Even sketches of the location and the prisons.
I love it. I mean, that has to be such incredibly gratifying work for you, just to be able to have some kind of closure for individuals, because oftentimes these are cases that sometimes cold cases. They're cases in which, family members are left hanging there, never knowing, and that's just such torture, to their hearts. And you had another case, and it had to do with a DJ in Denver. Case there. Let's talk about that also for a moment.
Yeah, that was a case given to me by a colleague, Robert Knight, who is he's photographed all the greats in the rock and roll field, for over decades. So he said, I've got a case for you. I'm just going to give you a coordinate. So he gave me it's a random series of letters and numbers. That's the address of the target, something for the viewer to focus on. And I saw a watery location. I saw it was brackish water, mixed seawater and fresh, off an island, off an isthmus. There was death. There was something wrong there. Something had seriously gone wrong. So I reported that back to him, and he didn't want to believe what I'd seen. And he said, this is a friend of his that had gone missing for 4 weeks. They didn't know where he was. So eventually I brought in the NRVG, and we got information for Robert that he was in the water, dead, etc., etc. And that it was near somewhere in San Bernardino. And there was lots of information that placed it off of the coast of California. And then Robert was and his wife were in California, in LA, saw a documentary about a body that had been fished up out of the ocean off Catalina Island. Mm-hmm. And he said, that matches everything the viewers have told us. That must be our friend. So they contacted the office, the morgue, and they were thought of as suspects for a while, Robert and his wife. But then they were able to get corroboration of their credentials and alibis, etc. Mm-hmm. And it was his friend that had been brought up. So then we were tasked to look for the murderer, where he went, etc. All of that data matched.
It's such incredibly healing work, because there's actually no other way for this work to be done. This is it. It's
right. Yes. There is a role.
Without people such as yourself, we're not going to have these answers. Mm-hmm. And we're going to get into something along that line that goes deeper into history a little bit later. But now I'd like to go to any other cases you'd like to bring up that you find particularly fascinating?
Yeah, there are two recent ones. One was we were tasked, I never know what's coming across my desk. So I had an email from a colleague who said there are some people down in Mexico on the ground there who are searching for a missing woman, missing girl, and they've run out of options. So they've asked the remote viewers. So I and one of my students decided that, okay, we're going to accept this. And we gave a lot of information, and it's still a confidential case, so I can't tell you too much about it. But we sent that off to the data to the colleague who sent it down to the people on the ground, the searchers. And from our data, they knew where she was and where to go and look, and they got her out. So that was very gratifying.
So when you have a team of people viewing together, how do you determine when there's enough information? Does it take 2 out of 3, 5 out of 6 or 7 before you actually decide, okay, we're going to go with this?
Okay, there's a potential pool of about 30 people. And once I send out an email to them, it depends who's available, who wants to take on the case. And they are tasks, and it's usually around about 10 people is an average, sometimes more, sometimes less. And they will send back their data to me. I will then act as an analyst and look at the data they sent back, because by this time I've already done my stuff, or first thing, my remote viewing, before I even task them. And they each come back with like pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, is how I like to put it. And so I put it together into an analysis and a report and send that off to whoever has asked for the data.
And so essentially, if you have like several of them seeing the exact same thing or in a similar enough arena, that's a go.
Right. I try and report all of the data if I can, because very often I don't know all the details of the case. So if I censor something, then it might be that if I don't put it in, it could be a key piece of information that they need.
Yes.
So I usually put everything in, plus their sketches, plus sometimes their musings if they seem appropriate, and then we see what we get.
Yes. Well, okay, now we're going to go on to what you call high strangeness, kind of a little more exotic application of your skills. And I find this fascinating, and our viewers certainly will find it fascinating, because I think human beings tend to be afraid of the unknown and others. And certainly in the conspiracy communities, you have all kinds of stories about every kind of being that is essentially other. So tell us about how you originally became involved in a project in which you had, protocol questions that had been developed with the intention of connecting with off-planet species.
Okay. I have always had an interest in off-planet stuff, always, right from being a kid. And then it actually came into some fruition back in about 2012. Actually, from 2003 was when I started working for a business client, which lasted 9 years. So from 2003 to about 2006, we were working mainly on business projects and some other interests of his. And then he called me one day and said, "Can you talk to the aliens?" And I said, "I don't know. I'll have to develop some kind of protocol for that." Remote viewing can see practically anything. So he said, "Well, if you can remote view people in my office and tell me about them and who they are and describe them, why can't you describe the aliens?" So I said, "Well, let me think about it." So I put together a protocol that involved questionnaires that are asked of indigenous species on Earth, that go out to remote areas, to locations where people know of the white man but don't, know of us, but don't have they still retain all of their customs and traditions and ways of life. So I adapted those questions to ask the ETs. And my client also supplied a whole bunch of questions. And we started off with 5 different races, including the tall greys, the hybrids, the reptilians, and then we didn't do the Annunaki until later. But there were a total of 21 eventually. And I sat down. I am not a medium. I'm not a psychic in the traditional sense. But what I did was I wrote up all the questions into a report on my computer, sat down at my keyboard and asked the first question. And I said, is there anybody out there that in this particular, say I was talking to the tall greys, is there anybody out there that would like to answer these questions? And stuff came back. So I'm going, okay, it's like being on a roller coaster. You go with it.
Let me ask one question here. Now, did you specifically intend to speak? Did you intend to speak to a specific group of beings or a class of beings? And then you'd say, if there are any tall greys out there,
right? Like each session,
okay,
we talk to a specific race.
Yes,
and I call them races. So as I asked as the answers came in, I was typing them in. And sometimes the answer was so weird, I'd have to ask a clarifying question. What do you mean by that? So I knew it wasn't coming from me. And there wasn't enough time between me asking and the stuff coming back for it to be, I tried to keep my own consciousness, my own opinions, everything clear of the picture.
Okay, so now I want to get into some specifics because partially because there is a lot of curiosity around the subject, of course, but also around certain species, there's a lot of fear. And more than anything, there are a lot of assumptions about what they're doing here, why, what their intention is towards humanity and such. So let's start by talking about, since you brought them up, the tall greys to begin with, and what did they have? And we'll go through a number of groups, what each of them had to share with you about their culture, about the relationship to time, the notion of creation and creativity, space, and us.
Yeah, the tall greys have their own agenda. They believe that they coexist with us. They visit the earth, and that's like a given. They get resources from the earth. They really feel that they're on a par with humans. They think it's kind of humorous that we think we own the earth. They talked about the abductions, because I specifically asked about that through the client's questions. And they said, abductions are fortunate. And I'm going, no, my internal, And so I would ask questions about, why is it fortunate? Well, because the hybrids that are developed become the ambassadors and go off into space and travel the universe. So my own consciousness is going, what? But I am just like a reporter. I'm like we're interviewing, And I was writing down everything on my computer. And they really think that humans are limited. And I took a little bit of umbrage at that, thinking, well, that's putting us down. But we really are in many aspects limited. Some of the species are so ahead of us that we're just catching up. And I believe we will eventually.
I believe so too, and I believe perhaps in certain areas we're already there. It's just that we're not aware of those own abilities and aspects of ourselves on a more psycho-spiritual and spiritual level. But one thing that's interesting, having interviewed some abductees along the way, is oftentimes, and I think John Mack's work, Passport to the Cosmos and such, also indicated some of this, is that oftentimes after an abduction experience, One hallmark seems to be, aside from the breeding program, that the abductee is shown glimpses of the Earth and shown glimpses of future scenarios, with an eye toward creating a deeper sense of responsibility toward our planet. Another thing that seems to happen is they indicate that their abilities on an intuitive or psychic level seem to be enhanced after these abductions.
Yes.
So they're working with them. And comments on that from your perspective?
I think what happens is because some of the abductions, and I don't think that's the right word for the experience, but I'll call it that. Sometimes they're very traumatic, and I think it awakes a dormant intuitive sense in people. So the intuition is already there. It's not that it's given to the abductee, but it's awakened.
That's very interesting, because trauma does do these things to us. I think of so many other people I've interviewed on near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and so oftentimes it was inspired by a very traumatic event. So you're saying it's simply the shock is allowing these other aspects to bubble to the surface for our use. That's fascinating.
Yes, yeah. So, the tall greys are very much hive mind, because I asked, am I talking to one or many? And they said, you're talking to all of us. So that was an interesting aspect.
It is. Now, where are they from? Are these interdimensional, or are they third dimensional from another planet? Where do they say they're from?
They're extra dimensional that travel interdimensionally.
Okay.
Put it that way.
Okay. All right. So there's no limitation. They're not bound by space in that sense.
No.
And it seems like a common theme, just from what I've heard you say before, is that there is a completely different notion of time and how time operates within a lot of these species. Maybe just comment on it with them for a moment, and then we're going to go to the small grays.
Okay. We think of time as fixed and linear, our human sense. But that is just Earth time. Once you start getting off planet, time is not, it's fluid. And I like to think of that in my own life. I say to people, there is no time, there is no space. We can manipulate time and space for our, ours and others' benefit. So when my client was asking about time aspects, they would say, no, we don't think in terms of linear time. And I've come to realize too that very much time is circular. And that seems their aspect of time is alien. It's alien time, which is totally incomprehensible to us.
Yes. Okay, another thing that's coming up here is that if you say that they're here in part because they're gathering and utilizing some of the Earth's resources, that they're not from a physical domain as we know it, but more extra dimensional, how would they be used? What resources would they be using them, and toward what end, if they're of a material nature?
From what they told me and what I've read of others is they come and they get water because they know this is the blue planet. And so they're able to take water, minerals, boron, and other minerals. And they did tell me a few things. I've actually put together, a friend of mine had put together a big Excel database of all of the data from the ET interviews that I have, and it's freely available if anybody wants to email
Where
me.
Can we find it?
They can email me at mindwiseconsulting@gmail.com. Yes. And I'll be happy to email it to anybody freely.
Oh, that's such a kind gift. Let's go on to the small grays, because those are the ones I think that are the most common, especially in abduction scenarios, and creating trauma through what the participant feels is an absolute lack of empathy, for example. That's how the experiencer feels it, and understandably.
Yeah, but again, they were very similar in mindset and group hive mind and focus and purpose as the large greys. The large greys seem to be more in control and more able to perhaps be autonomous sometimes, in choosing to talk to me, for example. But they seem to be not robotic, but very much behaving very similarly. So if you saw one, you would know what others were, what they could do or were about to do.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a predictive element to them.
And what did you find fascinating about that particular, the small gray breed or race?
That they were very concerned with each other. There was the hive mind, so there was very much, they always had to work as a group mind. And there really was not a huge amount of autonomous thinking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, and I think that's kind of the feeling that people who have met with them take away from it as well, that it has to be good for the whole, that there isn't that sense of individuality. Let's move on to another race that's very recognizable to us and others have written about over time, and that is the Nordic race.
Yeah. When I interviewed them, they referred to themselves as the whites. And I've since read Charles Hall's books about the tall whites who were up in central Nevada that he came across when he was working with the Air Force. Those are fascinating books if anybody gets to read them.
Yes.
Millennial Hospitality. And the second book, he's written 5, but the second book, I feel is the very best one, or the one to begin with, Charles Hall.
Yes.
And he was put out there as an airman to let off air balloons to measure air, the wind currents, etc. But that seemed to be a secondary purpose that they asked him to perform. And he very quickly came into contact with these beings and reported back, I saw this white coyote out in the desert that was standing up on its hind legs. That was really weird. But as people, I'm not going to spoil his story, but it is a fascinating story.
So what did they tell you about themselves?
They said that they're very much, they like people, they like humans. Not the Greys had no real feeling either way. It was just they were there for resources. The whites actually, the tall whites, the Nordics, felt very in resonance with us. And they said that they actually have Earth-based members of their race. And sometimes they've been here for centuries and living in plain sight or hiding in plain sight.
What would be some of their chief characteristics in terms of people saying, differentiating, say, a human from them, or can you even differentiate?
I've learned to. And if I do happen to encounter such an individual who might either be tall white or hybrid, then I treat them with great respect, with great honor. I would not out them. I really want to respect their role because they know how humans react to others.
Yes, with fear.
Our own race, yes. Right. So they want to remain living here doing their work.
What is their work here? Why are they here on Earth? And where are they from?
They really didn't, they weren't specific about their location, definitely off planet. And they're here to learn. So some of them come just for 6 months and they're just learning about humans. Others are here to assist and aid and work alongside humans. So very much in a helping role. And also, but the main factor is learning.
And how would you, I asked this earlier, you say you can tell the difference. Are there certain or kind of chief characteristics physically or in mannerism and such where someone would know if they had encountered a Nordic?
They seem different. They're tall, very tall and slim, and very, very, very pale. In fact, one that I encountered here in Boulder City in Nevada wore a lot of heavy pancake makeup, even when she was at the pool.
Okay.
So there are lots of there are lots of other stories that I'm going to put into another book eventually, because there is a hotel in Boulder City that seems to be like the cafe at the end of the earth.
I love it.
Where people, individuals, ET individuals, they call them, come and go.
That's fascinating. You mean not just the Nordics, but others as well?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Fascinating. I can't wait to read that book. I know people are going to now take field trips to Boulder City trying to find the hotel.
Right, but don't ask the managers, because they will not admit that there are ghosts there or ETs. You have to go in and just do your own research confidentially.
Yes, well, I would imagine. Let's talk about another species, and that is the reptilian species, because that's the one I think most humans have learned to be afraid of, especially in the last 40 years, since more kind of underground and even conspiratorial stories have come up.
Right, and I do believe that they are also Earth resident, as well as they told me that they pilot the ships. But I think there's much, much more to their roles. The reptilians didn't want to talk to me. They didn't want me to interview them at first, but I'm pretty stubborn. So I just persisted and said, I want to talk to you. So finally, they started answering some of the questions. They gave me a lot of no responses. I put NR in the transcripts because there was no response from them. But some of the questions that really struck me were, I asked them, what happens if you encounter a human on board a craft? And they said, first of all, that they would ignore them. And I said, what if you couldn't? They said, well, we would make a loud noise at them. And I could just imagine the fear that would engender from this creature making a noise at them. I said, okay, and I pushed, said, if the loud noise doesn't get them out of your way, what else do you do? And they said, well, we push them. So again, I could imagine that would be a really traumatic event. There was not as much information coming from the reptilians as the other species, but enough to show that I wouldn't want to meet them in a dark alley on a dark night.
Well, this is interesting. I just did an interview with someone at Gaia who our audience is familiar with, both my audience here and at Gaia. And I won't give names at the moment, but when she was a little girl, her father had some nefarious dealings. Mm-hmm. And when she was a little girl, these people would come around, and she tried to warn her parents, these are not who you think they are. These people aren't what they say they are. And she said it was horrifying to her because they actually, from her eyes, she was seeing what we now call reptilians. They had scales and tails. And so how this whole notion of reptilians, either as a hybrid species or more so the ability to cloak as a human, I think that's what a lot of people are frightened of. Can you comment on that a bit?
It's a natural fear of something that's very different and very potentially aggressive. And this reptilian fear is, I think, in our genes from way, way back, in history and in our, so even perhaps from our pre-human ancestry. So it could be that we've been interacting with them for, I don't know,
forever.
Millions of years. Yeah.
Is there a hybridization between our species?
A small aspect, yes. What I found out, there was hybrids are mainly human, gray, Nordic and a little reptilian if it's necessary, because they do send out some of the hybrids that are not returned out as ambassadors.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. And I'm not surprised that they didn't really want to speak up that much about their presence here and what they're up to. And so let's move on to the Annunaki, because that's another one. If you watch the History Channel and Ancient Aliens, every single story kind of ends ultimately with, well, it was the Anunnaki. It's kind of a pat answer. But from your point of view, what did you learn about the Anunnaki?
Okay, the first thing I asked them was about the Sumerian texts and the translations, etc. And they said that is partially true, but in any aspect, when you've got ancient texts or you've got somebody translating those texts, they're not going to get it all 100% right. They said humans were never treated as slaves. Humans were our children, which I thought was interesting, because there's always been this.
When they say children, do they mean literally as in hybridization of some kind, or cloning of some kind?
Both, and training and knowledge. They did harvest gold, they did mine gold. I didn't really go a lot into that, the early history, but that was one of the things they said was it wasn't all correct. What we know now about them and their early history isn't all correct.
What part that Sitchin, for example, Zechariah Sitchin brought through, did they feel was not an accurate portrayal? Where were some of the differences here?
The slave aspect, very much so. Yes. Because they took sort of almost a startled response to that. No, humans were our children, are our children. And the other thing, the more modern aspect, is that they are here on Earth.
And they're here on Earth. Okay, so
the modern descendants.
You've given us, and this is a hybridized species, so that shouldn't be surprising to anyone. But as you told us what sort of traits you notice in some of the Nordic beings that you find friendly to Earth and here to learn on short stints, what do you find as far as how an Anunnaki or Anunnaki hybrid might appear to us on Earth?
They appear very human. They are often very tall, sometimes mistaken for the Nordics. They're very much in the helping realms. They're very much the volunteers. They're the people who go in and help, assist. You will find them in children's homes, nursing homes, senior centers, community projects. They will be people there. They feel, I think that is part of their role, is to assist. And so that's where you would find them, most likely.
And let's talk about now, thank you for that, I appreciate that. Let's talk about orbs, because most people see these light and, have absolutely, we all see them, have absolutely no clue what these are about.
Right, yeah. I saw a physical orb in Princeton one time, which I wrote about. And when I started asking the orbs, could I talk to them? Could I ask them questions? And they said, that's what we're here for. We carry information. They appeared sentient, which means that they think, they're able to think for themselves. They're interdimensional, they're intergalactic, they're everywhere. And they travel. They act as couriers. They carry information. And very often when you see an orb sometimes there can be pictures, in the orb. People see faces or very much that's just information. It's not that they're carrying the spirit of somebody or it's just information. So that is their role as messengers, carrying information. They can be called, as a lot of people know. And, people will call them in and take photographs, and there's like thousands of them.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, that's beautiful. Let's maybe have you, instead of me selecting, why don't you choose another species that you found really interesting? I mean, we could go on. As you said, ultimately there were 21, and people can read about in your book. The title of it is Voices from the Cosmos?
Right. And if you go to Amazon, put my name in, Angela Thompson Smith.
Yes.
You will, Thompson with a P. You'll see I've got 8 books.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this particular one is referring to what you learned about these species. But
right.
maybe pick up one or two more that you found really fascinating.
Okay. The most interesting one, and it was at the end of the year when we were doing the interviews, and we had to stop because the client came under some harassment, was the RAL, the species on Mars.
With the RAL?
The RAL, R-A-L-L.
R-A-L, okay.
Yeah, with a double L.
Yes.
And they told us that they are very much present on Mars, but mainly underground, that they have water, that they have food, they grow food, which is now being confirmed that there actually are minerals, there is underground water, and this is all now being confirmed after the fact, which is very satisfying.
Yes, indeed.
I asked them about the rovers, the Mars rovers, and they said, well, we thought they were gifts for us because some of the rovers just were lost.
Right.
And they said, we didn't know who these were from, but as they kept coming, they figured out these were from somewhere else and that they were not meant for them. But in the beginning, when the rovers first started appearing on Mars, the RAL felt that they were gifts for them.
So how did they feel about that potential? Well, I mean, you could look at it on one level, I think, as some people in this world on Earth would say, as almost colonization of Mars by human beings. How do they feel about the potential of Earthlings living on Mars?
We didn't go into that a great deal because I had the set questions.
Yes.
And reading Voices from the Cosmos gets a little tedious sometimes because the same questions were asked of each race. And people say, why couldn't you ask them something else? Well, we had a plan. We had a protocol. And so we didn't go too much into the colonization. They expressed a curiosity about humans and a wish to perhaps meet them. And they actually said, where are the humans?
Interesting.
And this was back, of course, in around 2006, 2007. So, they were curious about humanity.
Well, and then, of course, there are these military stories that come out from, Robert Dean and who's since passed, and others saying we have already established bases on Mars and that we already have underground facilities there and such. And that's why I was asking if they had any comment on that, because
they didn't at that time.
Yeah.
But I feel it's somewhere in the middle, from outright denial that we're there to all of the fantastic stories that I hear. So somewhere in the middle is the truth.
Yes, as is usually the case.
Yeah.
Well, Angela, now you're going to be in November at Paula Harris's conference, StarWorks. I'm going to be there. Russell Targ is going to be there.
Exciting.
It's going to be exciting. And this one is going to be dedicated to remote viewing. Mm-hmm. And I know you also teach. You'll do workshops and lectures and help people come in connection with those skill sets in themselves, right?
Well, before and after the conference, I will be holding some classes here in Boulder City, which is about an hour away from the conference. Conference. When I'm giving my talk, I will give an experiential session. So I will be asking the audience to actually remote view it very simply.
Wonderful.
I usually do, yeah.
That's going to be fun. I've been in those before, and it is a lot of fun. And you surprise yourself and say, "Oh my God, how could I have known that?" Right? Well, it's all connected. It's all one.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts before we sign off here? And I'll let everybody once again know how to get hold of you.
Yeah, I'm at the conference. I'm actually, I haven't discussed this with Paula yet, Paula Harris, who's who's putting on the conference, but I'm going to elaborate on my, there's a talk on YouTube, Remote Viewing High Strangeness.
Yes.
And there's a lot more confirmation come in since that talk. So I want to elaborate on that talk and add in new data, new remote viewing projects. So it's going to be exciting. Yeah.
That's going to be very exciting for all of us. I can't wait to hear your talk. And in the interim, people can, again, go on Amazon and order any number of your books, Angela Thompson Smith, and the one we were talking about a bit ago, Voices from the Cosmos. And again, to reach you directly for transcripts of these, the data that was given from the ET species. As you said, you will do that freely.
Right, from my email address.
Mindwise Consulting, Mindwise, W-I-S-E, consulting @gmail.com, right?
Right, or one,
All
no
one
breaks.
word.
Yeah.
Very good. Hey, I want to thank you so much, Angela. You have such a grace and a credibility about you. It's really what makes this subject work for people, and a huge heart. I'm very much looking forward to meeting you in the flesh. And until then, I just want to say thank you for sharing your work with all of us.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, once again, mindwiseconsulting.com to reach Angela directly. And that's also, even if you have something really, challenging that's come up, like we said, Angela and her group still work on cases. So feel free to reach out to her on that level as well. And of course, to attend StarWorks USA conference in November. Until next time, thank you for joining us here at reginameredith.com. Thank you for watching this video. You can find many more like it free of charge by going to reginameredith.com. And if you're finding that this kind of content is adding value to your life, you might want to support my work by clicking on the Patreon button on the website, reginameredith.com. As a patron, you have special videos, insider commentary, and much more. Check it out.